Gives it a wavy camera.
Yeah. Well, we're in a picture.
Makes for a better shot. I agree.
Yeah, we want to try to go up the tree. Tamara sitting right in the middle of it. She figured she called us.
Okay, so let's get started. This is the Committee on Bias-Based Policing. Members of the public, thanks for coming tonight. This is the second step of what the Police Commission asked this committee to do. The first part was to put together a panel of experts and bring perspectives and experiences, as well as recommendations to the Police Commission. That happened at the last meeting. Today is the second step in which we are requesting your input, perspectives, and even recommendations on the policy. We're going to be capturing your input. It is going to be presented to police commissioners at the next meeting. This is not the only way you can give the police commission input on this policy. You can also write to the police commission. You can go on the website, find the address. You can also email the police commission. And quickly, I want to introduce the members of the committee. Edward Guerin, member of the Human Rights Commission, and Joe Tyndall, also a member of the Police Commission. My name is Juan Carlos Valle. Without further ado, we're going to welcome the first person to the table. First, I have Carol Berg Caldwell. Say your name. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Carol Berg Caldwell. I live at 2510 Augusta. I'll make this short and sweet. There's lots of folks here from community that have signed up to speak, but I wanted to express my gratitude to the event that you first hosted 3 weeks ago. There were so many fine speakers on the panelist. It was really good length, depth, and breadth of community concerns. But I especially want to commend and thank one of the panelists, EPD Officer Jeb McGuire, who shared his the information that his board at the police union, Eugene Police Employees Association, asked him to convey was their interest in being part of this puzzling and complex and challenging community issue. I highly appreciate that he shared that so publicly, and I do believe that that is the interest of the police union, because we are all in this together. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Sterling. Sorry, I don't have a first name. Is that Mr. Sterling? Just come to the table.
My name is Sterling Rand, and I'm quite confused by this policy. I don't understand a policy to be fair to everyone. Isn't it quite self-evident that police departments should treat everyone the same? And do we actually need a policy to say you have to treat everybody the same? I don't understand. It's like, is there a policy that you can't urinate on the street? I don't think so. It's self-evident. This is also self-evident, at least I'm concerned. And actually, I'm much more concerned with the militarization of the police department I am about this particular policy, which seems to me self-evident. I don't understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Jim Stouffer.
I'm Jim Stauffer. I'm a volunteer with the Lane County chapter of the ACLU. And we would like to start by commending the Police Commission in its entirety for addressing the issue of bias-based profiling, and thank you for holding this public forum. We submitted a letter to the Commission with our comments about this project. And the letter addresses a few points in the policy itself, but mostly we focused on asking questions about the next steps in this project. That's kind of where it really meets, where the rubber meets the road. We asked questions involving the data collection, the assessment of the project, and the training. We have several questions in this letter, and I'm not expecting to hear answers to this tonight. But I do ask if tonight we could hear something about the current state of planning of the next phases, like the timeline you anticipate for the program, and especially how organizations that are interested in this project can stay involved and informed on what's going on and how it's progressing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Mr. Neil Van Steenbergen.
I'm Neil Van Steenbergen, 1366 Lawrence, Apartment 8. I also want to express my appreciation to the Police Commission, to this committee, to the department, and to community members for their work on this continually developing bias policy. Last month, when I made a statement before the committee and the panel, I mentioned what I brought to this table, including multiple years of working with the department in a variety of ways. I also spoke of the privilege that I bring to this table. White, heterosexual, housed, middle class, male, relatively able-bodied, all of those privileges. And that's my concern about this bias policy. No matter how well written it is, the success of it depends on people implementing the policy itself. Most of us with privilege are not aware of how consciously and unconsciously, individually and systemically, that privilege impacts our interactions with others. I've been a trainer and facilitator in tons of workshops relating to diversity and privilege, including some with EPD. Usually participants listen, they express appreciation, leave, and little has been changed. Let me suggest a different approach. This is not about the policy itself, this is about the implementation of it. I've co-facilitated close to 20 study circles on race at LCC, eWeb, and the Oregon Research Institute. It's a 6-week program involving 10 people, 5 from the agency and 5 people of color from the community. My suggestion is, and there's a curriculum involved in this, it's not just an intellectual discussion, it's an experiential kind of thing. My suggestion is that this also is not about blame, it's about understanding. So my suggestion is that for possible training, and I've been a trainer with the police department in diversity training, that a group of 10 people get together, 5 members of the department, 5 members of the community, and there's a discussion around bias. And people talk about their bias, people listen to other people about their bias. It's about sharing about our bias, it's about listening, it's about learning, it's about moving on. And I can see experiences like that, workshops like that, involving members of the department and members of the community, focusing particularly on bias. So we have a policy, which is a good policy, but no matter how well it's written, the people implementing that policy are the ones that make it work. And if we could create a program where community members and department members and a number of workshops could get together and have that kind of discussion, I can see some real benefit in that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Mike McFadden.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Mike McFadden. I also agree that with any policy, there needs to be the reciprocal side of enforcing that policy from the government end. And when we talk about bias, I think that among many of the more obvious biases of our time, we also need to consider the more subtle biases of socioeconomic condition, mental illness, poverty, drug addiction, and things like that, and how the people we have as our government employees enforcing our policies are going to be dealing with some of the more difficult, or some of the more hard, or some of the more things that they personally may morally disagree with. People, how are we going to have a uniform policy with a diverse group of employees whose personal opinions about whether someone is or is not worth it based on their condition? I think that this is really important as far as coming down to how are we going to enforce a policy of non-bias in our policing. Thank you.
Next, Michael Ratliff.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me. My name is Michael Ratliff, and I live at 2343 Augusta. And what I would like, and I would like for everybody to get something that's measurable, something to where I can say that things used to be like this and now they're like this. And I think it's important so we have a scale to know how we're moving.
Thank you. Next is Shaul Cohen.
Thank you. I'd like to share a brief anecdote and two concerns relative to the policy. Approximately 18 months ago, I had occasion to contact EPD about a case of perceived bias. My son was singled out of a group of young people and detained. When I contacted the EPD, I was told by the lieutenant in charge of diversity training that there had been no bias because the officers were trained not to be biased, and therefore there had been no bias. I pursued the conversation with another officer who told me that the policeman who had detained my son had in fact some issues with this and should have some additional training and that he would look into it. I pursued the conversation with Chief Kearns, who told me that he would get back to me. He didn't do that. I had the feeling that I was listened to but not heard. This leaves me with some question about the judgment of the officers and the commanders, the quality of the training, and this policy relies on their judgment to be working effectively. I don't have confidence that it can. A second point, I'd like to draw your attention to point 402.2 in the policy, which says the chief goal for the Eugene Police Department is to reduce the threat and fear of crime in Eugene. The department will only accomplish this by proactively deploying officers to areas of high crime. This is a document that talks about bias and profiling. It then says that the police will go to areas of high crime. I take the inference from this that the areas of high crime are the areas where there will be bias and profiling. Therefore, there's a link made in this very document between the color of people's skins or other protected categories and high crime areas in the city. It troubles me greatly that this document is itself flawed in a fundamental way by making this association. Thank you.
Anybody else wishes to speak? I want to quickly say thank you to all the commissioners, and I see Councilwoman Sayret in the audience. Thanks for taking the interest. I also see a few organizations representatives here. I was told at the beginning of this meeting that some of you may not be here to speak, but your participation is to come and observe. That is also welcome. That is also valued. I am now going to turn a couple of minutes to the commissioners who are here, and they're welcome to get their comments or feedback on the microphone. I'm going to start first with Joe and your questions or anything back, and I'll circle around with commissioners in the audience.
I want to thank all the folks who came to speak this evening. I think in every case that the issues that you raised are things that are of concern to me, and we're working on it. This is going to be, I guess one speaker asked, what is the process going to be like? And this will be evolving over a year. It comes in conjunction with the implementation of some software for reporting in the department, and that has the ability to add fields for certain types of information so that this information can be collected and can be analyzed to determine, the existence of bias. So there are mechanisms to look at this kind of stuff. And so again, I want to thank everyone who came tonight to speak, and there will be more opportunities. The Police Commission does meet the second Thursday of every month, generally at the police station on Country Club Road. And please, as this unfolds and you have thoughts about it, that's an opportunity to address the Commission again on this topic. And thank you for coming tonight.
Edward?
Thank you. Thank you.
That one too?
Yeah, thank you.
Do I carry the little thing here?
No, you just put it on.
That's good. First of all, I want to acknowledge our empty chair here, Commissioner Bill Whalen, who couldn't join us, but who has served on this committee, and also our other police commissioners in the audience. And thank all of you for coming and giving your commentary. I did want to speak directly to we'd like to be able to tell when it's different by some measure. And believe me, that's what we and the rest of the police commission are looking for as well. What I think the department is looking for too is measurable results. The data collection that's being designed now with input from the police independent auditor's office is designed to quantify progress or to identify when progress isn't being made. Would also like to address the concern I keep hearing, and it's a very real concern, about the phrase high crime areas in this policy. If the community feels strongly that the addition of a phrase like as defined by crime data, that might clarify the matter for some people, I believe that's what the department is talking about here. It's a data-driven police department at this point, so they're looking at reported crimes in, say, a neighborhood. And folks, if you don't call them in, they're not reported and they don't go into the data, so you don't get as much coverage there because the department doesn't know you're there. That, I think, is the intent of this deployed high crime area. But if it needs to be made more clear with something that says as defined by data, I think that's the direction that the public might want to urge us to go. That's really all I have to say, except thank you for your input.
I'm going to hold my comments on what I've heard tonight to the very end. So I would like to hear from police commissioners present. I did tell them that I would put them on the spot as part of the program. And I'm going to start with the very own chair of the police commission, Mr. Walker, if you want to come to the microphone.
Thank you.
To the face of the audience, or commissioners, whatever. But your thoughts on what you've heard tonight.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, and again, let me thank everyone that came tonight. You obviously have an interest in this subject or you wouldn't be here. But mostly I'd like to thank the committee for the widespread work that they did in getting this message out and in hearing people for several months now on this issue and helping the commission to make determinations on what we need to amend and change as we go forward from here. The first thing that comes to mind for me is this is not an easy subject to discuss. It's difficult and it's emotional for some people, and it is hard to have the conversation about because people have opinions and they have sometimes what they believe their beliefs are, what somebody else thinks their beliefs are. And what we're hoping to do is by creating the discussion, out of the discussion comes some form of understanding. So we're dragging this issue into the light, out of the dark, and we're hoping by putting light onto it, we're going to have some kind of resolution where people will be at least satisfied, if they're not happy with the way the police are doing business, at least satisfied that it's being applied in an even-handed and fair manner. That's what our purpose is. I think right now, after having attended, and some of the commissioners attended with me, a 4-hour session on a review of how the police are trained in bias policing. The program they have is nationally recognized. It's very good. I think it encourages their input and tries to get them to give their true feelings about how they feel about a certain situation, and then they go over it and over it and over it. And so some of these things will continue throughout their careers. They'll be trained and so forth. I think it's a good start. As we said, there's still problems. We know that. We look around the country, there are cities a lot worse and there are cities a lot better. But here in Eugene, which is where we live, we want to make sure that everybody is safe and protected in a fair way. So thank you very much for your work, and thank you for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Vice Chairwoman Tiana Miller. Do you have anything to?
Sure. So I wanted to thank everyone who's present here today and who took the time to come to our public hearing and express their opinion. It's really important for us to hear from people in the community about their perspective on this policy, whether they have something that's brief to say or whether they have something more involved that they choose to put in the letter. Each and every one of you and what you said is important for us to hear, and I really do appreciate it. A lot of people don't attend these because they're busy doing other things, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. I agree with Commissioner Gehring's comment about the high crime area. I think that we might need to clarify that in the policy. I don't know how many of the folks of the members of the public that are here today know about the data-led policing that the police department's done. Several years ago, Chief Kearns implemented some software that helped them track areas of crime, and I believe that on the police department's website you can look up those maps. And surprisingly, we see that data regularly in our police commission meetings. And surprisingly, my perception is that the highest crime areas around the University of Oregon. It tracks certain types of crime, and you can look up different types of crime like car thefts and things like that. So if you haven't had the opportunity to look at that data and what might be characterized as areas of high crime, I'd encourage you to go to the police department's website and look at that, how those maps are listed. I agree that if that's what the intention is, it probably does need to be clarified in the policies, because obviously if it's not clear to the folks here today, it's not going to be clear to the general public. So I appreciate that comment. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner James Manning, do you have anything to add? Please come to the microphone.
Thank you. First off, let me thank the committee for the extraordinary work that you've been doing so far and stuff. You know, you've taken on a task and you've done a fantastic job. And this particular forum is indicative of the work that you've done. Next, I'd like to thank the public for coming out. It's very important to hear what the public has to say, because we, the members of the Police Commission, are your representatives to the police department. We are not part of the police department, so it's very important that we get that distinction between what our job is and what we do, and our relationship between EPD and the public. We are you, and we are your voice at the table. It helps us to kind of convey your message when you come up and you appear and you make your comments known. A lot of things have been said so far, and I really appreciate that. The feedback has been very impactful, and it's very powerful. We've heard some interpretations of what this policy looked like. Bearing in mind that this policy is in its infancy stages, it is not a policy yet. We are in a development stage, so your input is very important. We found out now that perhaps when we talk about high crime areas and stuff, that data-led policing, those activities are the indicators that would classify that as activities of being high in crime. So that's very important. Something that's measurable, that's very important, because if you don't know where you start, you'll never know where you're going to end. So I really appreciate that. I've also worked this issue from a state advocacy commission as well, as far as bias of crime and things like that. So we have the panel of the police commission here. You have some very informed citizens, federal citizens, that have been working this for some time, and it's a panel, a commission that people that really care. And thank you again for coming out. We encourage you, I encourage you to show up at our Thursday meeting, next Thursday, police commission meeting, and then bring your ideas out, because if you don't come forward, then we make assumptions that this is what you are looking for, and that's the wrong way to be. We need to hear from you. Thank you.
Commissioner Lurkey, you have anything?
Yeah, thank you. Like Joe Tyndall said, this ability to track new statistics comes from software. And that's kind of the way everything's going, is the ability to track more and more things. And the tracking may be able to be done for good and it may be done for bad and downright evil purposes. As we decide that we're going to track more information about people, I think we need to step cautiously and really hear what everybody has to say. So please continue to keep track of this and keep in touch with the police commission and let us know what your comments are about this, because the way things are going is more and more tracking, whether it's going to be every single car that drives by a license plate data reader that's posted on a particular street corner, or facial recognition software. It's something we're going to have to be vigilant about and decide what we're going to be using this data for. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. And Jim Gardner, you have any thoughts, anything about what you've heard tonight? That's your exercise for the day.
Yes, it is. Well, going almost last, unless Claire is going to.
I will be.
It sounds like Claire will be, so I won't be quite last. Almost everything's been said already, but I do want to thank the committee for all of the hard work they put into this, and very impressive what you put together here, and all the public also for coming, not just this week, but last week also. It is very important for us to hear from you, and it's very helpful for us when we're making our decisions. And we, like it's already been stated, we do represent you, so it's good for us to hear from you to know if we're doing right or if we're doing wrong. I think it was already talked about kind of basically having a baseline so we know if we're doing better or doing worse. I think it's still in its infancy, as James said. Even the data collection points, as far as I know, haven't been entirely decided upon yet. But that should be coming out fairly soon. And I think it'll start slow. I think the chief has emphasized that in our meetings, that he wants to start slow and build up, because you certainly don't want to start a program off doing all kinds of things and then have to back it off. You usually want to build up to it. So there'll still be a lot of time and there's still a lot of work to be done, and we'll continue to follow up with it as time goes on. Thank you.
Councilwoman Blair Sarver is also part of the Police Commission, and I'm inviting her to come to the table as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of the commission and give input. And thank you very much for holding this forum. And I really appreciate the public input and public showing up tonight. And I know many of you have been involved with these issues for many years. And I also want to compliment the commission on such a great showing in terms of commissioners showing up this evening as well. You guys really put in a lot of volunteer work, and it is very much appreciated. In response to the statement that why do we need to have a policy like this seems very obvious, that is absolutely true, but when you have an institution such as a city or a police department, there are institutional things that have happened over the decades that need to be addressed, and sometimes you need to state the obvious in policy in order to make sure that the institution is taking those things forward in terms of how they are implemented in the field. So I think this is a very important discussion that we're having as a community in trying to craft a policy that really reflects what we want to see our department doing in terms of how they implement the work that we ask of them out in the community. And I also really appreciate the input around having a basis for where we've started and where we're going to end up, and being able to analyze the difference. Hopefully we can make some difference in terms of how we are seeing our police implement policy on the streets. I think that's very, very critical. And to remind us that we also have another institution that can help us in this effort around the question of training and how it relates to policy. The police auditor's office is a very important part of the system, because as he fields complaints and looks into the reasons behind those complaints, he can actually help close the loop on training for the police department, and he does work closely with the chief in terms of making recommendations based on what kind of complaints come into the police auditor's office. So if you do experience a situation where you feel like you haven't gotten the satisfaction or the response you want from the department, applying to the police auditor's office with a complaint can really help close the loop on the training and policy aspects of our department. So I just wanted to make that point, and also mention that we've gotten some input via letters and email as well that has been very, very helpful and really appreciated. So thank you so much for your time and efforts.
Thank you. Thank you all commissioners for coming out. I am going to state my comments and my perspective. At the very end, I am going to ask the chair of the police commission to come up and kind of help us with the next steps as we see it. I chose to present my comments and perspectives at the end because that is important to wait to the very end. This is about the public and their input. First, I want to say, commissioners, thank you for your time and effort. I know we're missing Bill Whalen. He's on probably getting better. Your time and commitment is also very impressive. I chose to be away from my family to help the police commission, the police department, to improve relationships with underrepresented communities, specifically Latino communities and African American communities. And after 5 years, I see an improvement, but I too agree that we have to have a baseline to see where we are, to see where we're going, and make sure that we're in fact making some improvements. We're finally here. This policy has been in the works for a few decades, and I know that the chief is very, very supportive. This is an initiative of the police department. This is not another outside entity making them, as Edward would say, forcing them to do. But this conversation began a long time ago, especially with people of color. The hope is that this policy will guide the officers in focusing on behavior and not on race and ethnicity and other factors as basis to make contact with people. Now is the time for you to get involved, because now more than ever the interest is very strong about ending racial profiling in our community, and in some cases by law enforcement. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that officers have all the tools and all the resources to do the job, and in fact they're trained. This is a good baseline policy. Like any other policy, it's a work in progress. The feedback that I have personally received from people, in fact, happens to be even on the title, that although the title is good, that the professional context is intended to reflect the policy. What I have heard and also coincide is that the policy title needs to set the tone. It needs to say policy prohibiting racial profiling. And in my mind, it needs to be specific to prohibiting racial profiling and looking at the actual training. There's some aspects that we obviously have had conversations with among the police commissioners, and I hear and they hear me too. And your input in all this is very, very important. Yes, Councilwoman Claire Syred mentioned feedback on email and letters. We have received those. And by the way, if you want to send your feedback and comments, you can send it to 300 Country Club Road, Eugene, Oregon 97401. Also by email or on the website. As far as the next steps, I am going to ask Edward to briefly comment on that, and I want to bring back the police commissioner chair to kind of guide us to that.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Bob on this because I think he has a better overview than I do.
Okay.
Well,
sorry, Bob.
That's all right. I kind of turned around to be honest. I apologize for not doing that before. No disrespectful, no disrespect and things, but the next part of this is we are going to have a meeting next Thursday where we do have public comments. If you come before the meeting and sign up, you can speak. We also want to, at that point, go back to our policy. And this is what the commission does. Review it, make changes to it, and document those changes and send them on to the police department so that they can know what the commission intends to put forward to them. Now, it's up to them to make those changes, but at the same time, because of input from the community that we receive, that informs us on how we want the policy to be. That's what it's about. That's why we're here, to represent the people in the city of Eugene. So that policy will go forward from here to the chief with any amendments that commissioners made, and based on some comments I heard here tonight, there's at least one that I can foresee coming, and maybe possibly others. So that's the process, and then it will be continued until the implementation of this data-led policing, the bias reporting, and the collection of the data. The chief has formed a separate committee that is helping him decide on what points to collect the data on and how to do that. So that's the next part of the process. Is that pretty much how you wanted to
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
recap? Yeah.
This is an ongoing dialogue, and as Edward had mentioned before, this is not your only opportunity to be involved. We're going to have this conversation for a full year at least, in which you will have the opportunity to keep track of all of this. And the information we'll receive is going to, the same way we get it, we're going to send it to the police commission. And I am looking forward to the discussion that we have having coming in terms of how we're going to handle all the feedback from people.
Great. And thank you all very much for coming tonight. It means a lot to us to see people supporting our efforts. Thank you.
Audience members, you are welcome to stick around and talk off the air, so to speak, with, now that you know who the police commissioners are, you're welcome to engage and ask any questions if you want to. Otherwise, we will see you next Thursday, 5:30 at 300 Country Club Road for the regular police commission. Thank you again.
Sometimes it walks like a duck. Talks like a duck. So you gotta call it a duck. So we had to figure out how do we want this thing done. We get input back from saying one thing. How do we represent this in the frame? This is really hard.
There's only a meeting without.
No, there's only 3 of us.
Yeah, that's right. Well, these are points.
We're not. I'm just asking. I'm gonna bring this up. No, no, sit here. No. It has to be. But they were having serial meetings.
Being there with 2 attorneys.
They were meeting too.